Be good. So just to start off, thank you everybody for joining, and if everybody can like keep themselves on mute until the end, there will be a Q&A session where you can either unmute and ask your questions, or you can type your questions in the chat box. This campaign and this talk is brought by sort of the EcoCareers campaign as well as EduVenture, and our aim is to sort of give a brief overview of the career prospects within sustainability and what our amazing panelists do, what they're getting up to, and you can ask them any sort of questions you may have, and we can also share some sustainability tips as well. Yeah, I think I sort of covered most of it. Zina, do you want to introduce yourself and EduVenture?
Yeah, so EduVenture is a new society that's set up this year, and what we aim to do is raise awareness about the range of careers there are out there for students, and also promote some of the opportunities that are available, and really help students find jobs that have a positive social impact. And we usually run skill sessions, workshops and talks just to really help students find the career that's most suited to them.
Shall we start with Andrea to introduce yourself, and then you can nominate somebody else? Wait, can you? Sorry, I don't think we can hear you.
Yeah, we can't quite hear you.
Shall we move on to somebody else and then come back after you sort it out? Yeah. Okay. Chris, would you like to give like a brief overview?
Sure. Thanks, Lucy. So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me here. I'm Chris Webb, and I'm Head of Sustainability at an architecture and interior design practice, which is based in London and the UK, but we do work all over the place. And my job is to try and help our clients to produce more sustainable, healthy and ethical designs, equitable designs, and also reduce our own footprint as a business. Thanks.
And would you like to nominate somebody else?
Sure. Well, did I see that Andrea was back?
Let me see. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah,
we can hear you.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Chris. And thank you, Jinwin, and also Zina for having me. Greetings from Amsterdam, first of all, and welcome to everyone. So officially, I would like to call myself a sustainability consultant. Of course, that can mean like all the different things. My career's been around over 10 years, and I really started on the business side, working as a consultant, helping companies with their strategy, risk management, design, a lot of transformation and change management. However, as of year 2014, I had a very strong urge to contribute positively and create impact in the field of environment and also society. So I pivoted a little bit and adjusted my career to really utilize all the business experience, but to really keep sustainability in mind and also work on pushing sustainability agenda forward. So nowadays I'm a consultant to all the different organizations, from large corporate, smaller companies, startups, even governments, helping them to become more sustainable and create a sustainable strategy that is just making sense for everyone, from the planet, so the nature, biodiversity, to people. And circular economy is the way to go, I strongly believe.
Awesome. Yeah. Shall we move on to, would you like to pick somebody else?
Let's continue with Zion.
Hello, my name is Zion Lights. I'm a long-term climate activist and environmental writer. I've written for many newspapers, local newspapers, national newspapers, and was an editor of a small green magazine for 7 years. I've had quite a wide topic base for environmental issues and have now moved more into science, evidence-based reporting, still on climate change and biodiversity and all those sorts of issues. Yeah, looking forward to answering people's questions.
Welcome. Sarah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Sarah. My journey only started about 8 months ago when I was looking at creating a MyFitnessPal style app for conscious consumers. However, I did quite extensive consumer research and realized the timing isn't quite right for a product like this to get it correct and to get the data accurate. So based on that research, I'd intended to create a very small community to create a bit of a think tank to work on a product like this for about 2 years' time, when I believe the timing will be more accurate. That community has accidentally grown to over 50,000 people now, and I'm looking at partnering on with a potential global PR campaign around small actions making up a bigger impact. I can't reveal too much, but we run lots of amazing events with some incredible speakers who are working in lots of different areas of sustainability. But hopefully in the next week, I will have details on the global campaign.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And Charlie?
Hi, everyone. I graduated from Imperial about a couple months ago. And as soon as I finished my environmental technology master's degree, which I'm also happy to answer questions about, I went on to build my own sustainable venture, which was a impact calculator for small businesses. And I ran that for it, got acquired by a larger company called Climate Partner. And I am now a innovation/business developer for a larger company using my tools that we've embedded into this larger organization. And I create sustainability experts. And yeah, I'm excited to answer all your questions today.
Welcome. Excellent. So I guess to sort of kick off, so there's several of you that work within the field of consultancy, and I'm sort of curious about the differences between working as a small team in consultancy and working within a larger company, like for example Chris does. And would you like to talk a little bit about your experiences working with consultancies in terms of the scale? Starting with Charlie, I guess.
Yeah, sorry, Chris, you unmuted yourself. I guess in terms of scale, what's great about working with smaller companies is I think you take on a lot more responsibility, especially when you're a junior role. When you graduate, you will be a junior consultant or junior, etc. When you're in a small team, that junior almost gets a bit erased. Everyone has a bigger stake in a company if there's 10, 25 people. And you have amazing companies like EcoAct, South Pole, that are still quite small consultancies, almost think tanks, where you get more responsibility rather than PwC or EY, which is they have a very set structure for junior roles, and you might not get as much wiggle room or innovative space or creative space. And so I tend to lean towards the smaller business side. That's the vibe I get. That's my experience. Yeah.
And what about Chris? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, for me, I mean, it's almost like being a consultant in your own business sometimes, the role that I have, where you're like everybody is your customer in a way. You have your own set of clients you try and work on to make them more sustainable, but people come to you for advice on the most sustainable product. People can ask you, how can you help them design more sustainably? And sometimes they just ask you about influencing people's behaviors in terms of sustainability. So whilst you're embedded in the company and you've got one role to make your company more sustainable in their own footprint, in a way, I'm not sure it's entirely different in that really you're providing a service to your colleagues. And actually the way it works is you charge your time to their job, just like a lawyer might. So you pass on to a client. So actually, in many ways, I think you're an expense. You're making profit, but also you're charging your colleagues for your time on their project. So actually, I think it's completely different.
I see. Andrea, you have something to add?
Yeah, I just want to add, so I used to work for Accenture. So indeed, talking about the large consulting firm, we started our own consulting firm. So super, super tiny, starting with 2 people. I'm actually joining forces with a group of people. So again, we'll be working within a bigger team. And I would say working for a large company definitely has quite some benefits as well, because you're exposed to a lot of people who already have a lot of experience. And within Accenture, I work, for instance, on CDP climate change reports. So we were really, CDP is an NGO from UK actually, and we were working with all the data sets from all the different large listed companies in Benelux and France, diving through that. And what was super handy, being a part of large organization, Accenture having almost half a million people working for the company globally, is of course absolutely fantastic knowledge base. So whatever you need, whatever specialty, whatever details you need to find out, there's always someone who already has been working with that, knows the people, has the knowledge. But then again, exactly as Charlie pointed out, working for a small company, you're kind of like doing everything. So you got a chance to literally roll your sleeves and get busy with anything. Hence, the learning is maybe giving you different opportunities. So I would say both are super beneficial. Then again, it's up to you to decide like what's more important to you at this moment. Where are the opportunities and what you would like to do?
I see. Yeah. That's a really interesting point. So sort of like tailor your own personal like interest in seeing where you sort of really want to fit in. So also touching on the consultancy side. So I guess a big concern for a lot of students and indeed a lot of companies and investors is like sort of the issue of potentially greenwashing. And what happens is, it implicates a lot of, sorry, that was not. Okay. So that was my Alexa, it's just like, so okay, back to my question. So I guess with the issue of greenwashing, because it implicates the socially responsible investment policies and how the public perceives said company, what can consultants do to steer away from the greenwashing is my question. Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
I think being a bit of an advocate and a thought leader in your company, and if you truly want to steer away from greenwashing and greenwashing within your company, get clued up to know exactly what is right and what is wrong. And policies are ever changing, etc. But everything's super accessible online nowadays. So being a thought leader in your company and gently reminding people like these are the new policies, this is the reality, and sometimes make sure you fact check others as this space is changing very fast. That's my thought.
If you ask me, if I can add to that, I really strongly believe it's important to measure your progress. So you always start with a baseline, kind of doing evaluation where you're right now, and also setting some targets so you know where you want to go. And if you're really serious about achieving those targets, you would make them public. Ideally, you would have them directly in the strategy. And I also very strongly believe it's not about having a person that's a CSR manager sitting somewhere in a corner, but rather having sustainability integrated directly into the strategy. So we don't really need sustainable strategy, but we need strategy that's sustainable. And in order to do that, just make it very clear that you have a target and show progress, how you are doing in terms of achieving it. And for that, you need everyone within your company on board.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So, Andrea, you work on sort of the circular economy model as well, and you're kind of working towards on the transition towards circular economy. How is that currently going at the moment?
Well, I gotta say, I'm very happy to see that more and more companies are realizing that this is not just like something nice to talk about or nice to have, but it's actually a necessity if we really want to create a future. And if we want to be relevant for the market also in the coming years. And the circular economy is pretty much about completely changing the business model. So whilst the classical economy works on a linearity basis, meaning we take certain resources, we create certain products, we use those products, and then we throw them away and just go and buy some new. Circular economy is considering how to keep those resources within the loop in a circle as much as possible, and that way completely eliminate the dependency on new virgin resources and also waste creation. So the business models we're talking about are various. For instance, we could talk about, instead of buying a new t-shirt or new clothes, having access to new clothes. So I can imagine also some of you probably heard of fashion libraries where you can rent a beautiful dress or a pair of trousers. Or we're also talking about pay-per use. So instead of owning washing machine, you're pretty much like paying per the wash cycles that you use the machine for. Car sharing is a big part of that. Shared economy is being considered a part of that. And what is absolutely crucial is to extend the life cycle of a product. Meaning the fact that you don't need it anymore doesn't mean that it can't be of added value to somebody else. So again, you can resell, you can donate, but especially you can also repair. However, we gotta keep in mind that when it comes to creation of new products, design is absolutely key, because the design needs to be and enable us to repair those things, to update them. So when a part is broken, it should be easily replaceable, and ideally we'll be also able to share it. And at the end of the life cycle, so when nobody can use it anymore and it's really damaged, we can still recover bits and pieces of the resources, or it can really nicely biodegrade without creating any harm to the environment.
Yeah, I think what you touched on is kind of really quite cool in that, like, you know, there's a lot of products that are really designed, like frustratingly designed to be single use. And then when you actually topple that on its head, although I guess that the take up initially might be sort of quite reluctant just because of it might come in at a slightly higher price. So the issue is, how do you sort of communicate to consumers that, you know, it's worth sort of investing in the circular products. I was wondering if maybe Sarah or Zion, do you have any thoughts on how do you more effectively communicate adopting the circular products?
Yeah, so my thoughts on it, based on the consumer research I did as well, 97% of respondents said they prefer companies that are honest and transparent, but have flaws in their sustainability over companies who are unable to verify it with a third party. So I think it's really important to take consumers on a journey with the product so that they understand the source, where it comes from, you know, what the process is. And there's some really amazing companies that are doing this in their own way. For example, Paint a Jacket, they pre-order their products before they start making them, so there's no material wasted. Sheep Included are also incredible. They go right back to the source, like the sheep, the farm where your sweater, I haven't got mine here, but I have one sweater where it's come from. And even the packaging and everything, they take you on a journey. You scan a little tag on the jumper and you can find out what sheep you're associated to, and you essentially sponsor the sheep. And part of the journey is they put 5% of the revenue from the garment back into regenerative farming. So they're the first carbon negative fashion brand. There's a few other small brands also doing it. A friend of mine created built-in like bras and slip dresses and tops, and she's basically takes her customers on a journey as well and only makes what people order. So I think that's really important around the transparency and taking consumers on a, I've spoken about all clothing companies, but you can do it with other products too. You can take them on a journey so that customers understand where the product comes from. They feel more attached to it. because they understand, what has been sacrificed in terms of like the environment or anything on that journey, and they want to keep it for longer. So for example, my jumper from Sheep Included, like I treat it as a really special garment. And I think that's really important that we do that more, and you can have less things but still find more joy in less things. That's my take on it.
Oh, thank you. That's also really cool. I've never heard of the sponsored sheep garment before. I'll definitely check that out. Do you have any thoughts on that, Zion?
So it's not quite my area, and I don't know a lot about the circular economy. I've read a little bit about it, but I think the communications aspect is interesting. So my expertise is in, analyzing what something is, not necessarily products, that's not really my area, but analyzing something and then telling you whether or not it's effective or whether it might actually just be greenwashing, which is surprisingly common, particularly because sustainability, the term, doesn't really have any, it's a very broad meaning, and it doesn't have any, it doesn't have like a watchdog keeping an eye on it saying it should be this or it shouldn't be that. And a lot of companies saying they're sustainable, and actually, what does it mean? Does it mean that they're carbon negative? Well, what does that mean? Does it mean that they don't produce emissions? Well, everything produces emissions. So how many emissions do they actually produce? And is that actually better than other things that are out there? Are sheep then, cotton? I mean, cotton is very intensive, very environmentally intensive, and it's often flown here. So probably, I'm not saying the sheep scenario is not good, because probably it is, but it's quite complex when you actually start looking into it and you want to communicate it to people. And there's very rarely a clear answer. And it's usually about who's doing a better job rather than what is the best thing that's out there. And that applies to everything, not just products. I think, there's lots of different topics that I discuss, like bioengineering or energy, where it's actually really complicated when you get into it, and there isn't just one simple, easy, single answer. And it's my job to tease that out and then explain it to people so that they don't just get sold on, this is the answer, this is a silver bullet, and it's going to solve all our problems, because it never works that way.
Can I add something to this as well? Because everyone on this call, every consumer has a way of asking companies. So I absolutely love when a company claims to be sustainable or eco-friendly, I go on a bit of a journey with them. I question them and I'm like, so tell me, what makes this sustainable? Like, what research have you done? And I've had some wild answers. Someone told me they cultivated soy in North London, which obviously is not possible. And then always follow it up with a question and ask them, how often do consumers ask you this question? And you'll be surprised. It's basically never. It's always never. So as consumers, we need to do our bit. We can obviously make a difference by choosing where we put our money, but we can also question these companies that claim to be sustainable and put more pressure on them to be more transparent.
That's a really interesting answer. Like, I had no idea that, they don't basically get asked these things, because a lot of people just see the title, sustainable brand, and then they go, yeah, okay, I'll just buy it. Yeah, that's actually quite a...
Yeah, I have something to add. I really like your point, Sarah. And I think a lot of individuals are a bit stuck on, like, what can I have as an impact as an individual? And I think we're steered towards buying bamboo toothbrushes or simply having metal straws, but I think that's not good enough. And if you really want to have an impact, it's writing to Sainsbury's or writing to brands that you're not happy with. And it's voting for the right people, and it's investing some of your money back into reforestation projects, climate mitigation projects, and small things like switching your bamboo toothbrush. Like, we don't have time for that. And I definitely agree with Sarah. Like, if you can, write reviews, click like, click unlike. And now it's almost made a lot more easier, and having that say is super important and can force businesses to change.
So when you're kind of maybe as a science communicator or trying to report on these things, do you personally get in touch with these companies, or do you fact check them using other standards? I just wondered what the process is.
I always ask them. I usually go on Instagram and just ask them, because if they're claiming it, they should be able to back it up. You can go and do research, but that's harder. And I think it's important for them to know that people are checking and for them to be able to respond to that.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you do it on Instagram. I think companies are very, as soon as it's out in the public and you at them and you hashtag them, like you always get refunds from Ryanair if you tweet about them. So I agree. It's like doing it in a very public, loud space gets companies a bit shy and a bit flustered.
I usually
It's
do it like, I love your branding, or I think your scents are great, or I don't know, like I'll just say I love the colors. I'll always open it with something a little bit friendly to sweeten them. Yeah, and then they're usually more open.
I just want to add a little bit different angle. Fully agree what you, Charlie and Sarah, are saying. At the same time, I really strongly believe, looking at it from kind of like a company perspective, or like even a regulatory perspective, to really calling them out. I absolutely love analyzing their annual reports. And indeed, someone mentioned that typically they're fact-checked by the third party. And already over there, you can kind of see like, okay, how much have they invested into sustainability, into circularity, or into creating positive impact, whatever that means. Typically, they need to also explain a little bit more. And of course, when we're talking about the change towards a more sustainable future, very important role has to play also the regulation, because this is also what's keeping them a little bit in check. Is it enough? Probably not yet, definitely not yet. But there are certain regulations that are at least like capable of navigating them. Like, okay, you can't do that, or you can't do that. There are some limits. There are some certifications that you need in order to be able to prove something. So annual report is always a great place to start. But of course, this is only for the ones that are companies publicly traded. For smaller brands, exactly what you were saying, Sarah. It's very important to see how they're communicating, what is on their website, what claims are they making, do they have certifications to prove, do they have data to back it with, to back it up with.
And I'm just sort of wondering with the sort of regulations and looking at the certification side. So I'm guessing, Chris, with your work, you definitely look a lot at that in terms of choosing which is a better, more sustainable sort of material to use in your buildings and stuff. Is it quite convoluted to sort of filter through all that?
Yeah, it's a really hard task, and also quite interestingly, I think it's subjective as well. So when we specify products, you know, they have a big impact. We're all using them for buildings. Then you know, there's a whole range of suppliers, some from small and you know on a really good sustainability journey to large and must try harder. And so the process we're going through now is we question them all on six areas of sustainability, from you know more classic carbon and circularity through to packaging, transport, and also social sustainability, which I think is not covered enough in terms of who's making the products, where are they making them globally, what conditions are they working in, are they being paid fairly, are they being treated properly, and then to the next stage is what is that product actually adding back to the community that it's being manufactured in or used in. So you know, these are big, difficult questions, and of course you go through the whole questionnaire that we have, or the process we have of assessing our suppliers, and you know some of them perform really well in some areas, and then you know, maybe they're not auditing their supply chains properly for their you know treatment of labor. So nobody's going to score perfectly throughout, and then you have to make a bit of a process on you know what is the most important for this project, or the most important impact that that product can be making. Should you go with them at all? Do you have a red line in terms of you know they're doing something really well but another thing that's really bad, and therefore you just don't want to select them? And sometimes it's subjective. You know, if you're a vegan, do you want to specify a leather product even though it might be a byproduct from another industry? So I think there's no completely right or wrong answer. Well, there are some wrong answers actually, let's say that, but you know it is a whole process. You have to look at it in the round and you have to make your decision based upon that. And I think it goes back to your point on data, asking the right questions, the points that the other panelists have made. And the way we see it, at least, is if you're making a decision that's informed and you've collected as much data as possible and you've analysed it, then you're probably making a much more sustainable choice than if you just read this product is sustainable and then picked it. So yeah, it is difficult, it is convoluted, the certificates only tell you so much. And you really just have to get as much data as you can and follow it up with questioning. Question the suppliers when they're not performing so well. And often they will up their game, actually.
That's a very cool. I think for a lot of our students, it's quite reassuring to sort of hear that, you know, using data and using science-backed facts. It's like a lot of our students might be looking for jobs in this sort of area, and being from a STEM university, you know, science, looking at the data is sort of one of our strong suits, if you might. Do you have any ideas of some of the other skills that, you know, working within a consultancy you might be looking for?
Want me to answer that one, or one of the? Well, I can just do it. I'll do my quick take on it. I'm sure the others have got really good ideas. From my point of view, I think the skills you need is definitely data, it's definitely analytics, but I think it's the real skill is understanding how that data then makes the biggest difference. If that makes sense. So you have to be able to apply it back to the situation that you're in and the scenario you're in. And, you know, sometimes you have to sort of pick your battles, I think, in sustainability. And, you know, if I fight this corner on, you know, making them go back and look at their supply chains better, that's going to make a bigger impact than, you know, just focusing on their carbon numbers that are already maybe not too bad. So I think it's getting the data and then applying it correctly. And that's the most fun part anyway.
I also think that there's going to be a significant increase in the number of roles within like this field over the next 10 years, and no one should feel fearful that they're not qualified, because I'm no expert, and yet every day I'm talking to like incredible experts. But we need more people who didn't care a year ago to care now. So never feel like, oh my goodness, I can't get into this industry because I have no experience. Like, they're exactly the people we need, because you understand the customer base of whose behavior we're trying to change, because you are essentially that person just a few months down the line. So never feel like I don't have the experience. Like, just look at it as any career, and just get stuck in, just show that you're interested. And people in this industry just really want to work with people who want to make a difference. So yeah, never be fearful that, because I speak to a lot of people in our community who are like, I don't know how to get into this field. And we're about to start hosting more events, you know, around how to get into the field. And there's some incredible job sites up, like Climate Base is a really good one. I can't think off the top of my head, but there's about 5 that are focused all on climate jobs. So definitely check those out. And there's lots of different areas that you can jump into in this field.
And just to build on that, I'm actually a real example. I mean, like, my background is international business. So when I started my career, I didn't even know a career in sustainability is an option. I was absolutely not aware of that. I always thought of sustainability as sort of a value, like you either care about nature or you don't. But then indeed, having the opportunity to work on some hardcore projects that require the sustainability, strategy, risk management, so really looking into how to make companies more successful in terms of profit. Mostly something wasn't right. I felt there has to be something more. And it was really 7 years back when I started to explore, okay, how I can utilize those skills that at a first sight don't seem like they're linked to sustainability at all, and how I can really use them for greater good to really help companies create a tangible impact. So for me, the shift to sustainability was actually from risk management and from strategy. And at that point, many people were questioning, what is a person from risk management doing within sustainability? And I really believe that one of the key skills to have for consultancy is also being able to see a bigger picture, being able to see connections between things, because everything is interconnected. So critical thinking, being able to create a link and see how things relate, I do believe that's very important. And yeah, I mean, like exactly what Sarah mentioned, any field right now, whether you work in IT, whether you work in a field of education, whether you work for a company, so you're actually becoming an expert or a specific industry. We need all of that. Ideally, in the future, we don't have sustainability job, but every single job will have sustainability as an integrated part of that.
And what about Charlie? So you actually graduated from Imperial, and how did you set foot within the field of sustainability?
Yeah, I went on to do the Imperial Environmental Technology Masters, which was great. A very like interdisciplinary masters where we touched upon environmental economics, environmental politics, ecology, and a bunch of other topics. And that really helped me expand my network and really understand sustainability in a holistic way. And I would recommend the masters. And the way it works is it's over 1 year. You, as an Imperial student, you are very likely to enter this master's, but there is an application process. The first term is based on just getting everyone to the same playing field in those different domains. And then your second term is on a specialization, so like resource management or environmental economics. And then the last term is a long thesis with a company of your choice or a title of your choice. And that's kind of how I got into the sustainability space, is doing a degree. Yeah.
See, that's pretty cool. Yeah, it seems like a really natural transition to, you know, go from like biology into sort of the masters and into sort of working with your startup and everything. How about Zion? How did you get started within the field of sustainability?
I think my background's quite different to everybody else's here, because I got into it through activism. So about 10 years ago, I was arrested as part of Camp for Climate Action. Every year we targeted a different large company that was investing in something bad. So 1 year we chose RBS Bank because it was investing in tar sands, which they're actually not doing anymore. They're supposed to be phasing it out. And we went up to Edinburgh during the Edinburgh Fringe, and we shut down as many RBS banks as we could. And I was quite young then when I was doing that, trying to make a difference. And yeah, from there kind of went on to writing more about the issues. You have to bear in mind that 10 years ago, nobody really cared. Like, nobody cared about sustainability. Nobody listened about climate change. We took some quite drastic actions because we were trying to get it on the agenda, and it didn't really happen. So I kind of went away on my own for a little while, dipped in and out of different groups, didn't really find that they were appealing to me. Green groups, that is, green NGOs, who, sometimes they're not as sustainable as they say they are either, in my experience. And so I did a master's in science communication because I wanted to learn to be able to dissect information and work out for myself whether it was, whether it added up, whether the solutions that different people propose actually adds up. And then I was offered a book deal, and I had a book published on how to lower your carbon footprint if you have a family, because I had children, and before that I was like in the Guardian, the Telegraph, as a person that had this extremely low carbon footprint, and then I had children, and I was like, wow, this is really difficult. And actually there was nothing at that time that would show you how to lower your carbon footprint once you've had kids. So I wrote the book on that because I felt that it might be useful to people, but it was still very hard to talk about climate change. I was still trying to do it and literally wrote an article for the Huffington Post that said, can we talk about the C word now? That was only 4 or 5 years ago. It shows you how much it's changed, how much now it's on everybody's minds and everybody's talking about it. And I was involved in Extinction Rebellion, and I mostly did media work for them. So I was a coordinator in the media team, and helped found their climate reporting newspaper, which was called The Hourglass. It was a print newspaper, printed and recycled paper, and the idea was to push the narrative on climate, people thinking about what maybe ordinary newspapers should be reporting on. I've had a very long history of writing in different ways, and it is my, it is my livelihood as well, but it's also just been a passion for a long time, and it's a kind of natural progression and jumping back and forth between doing actual activism, which isn't paid, obviously, and then writing about it, which if you've done something that's quite significant, like a book or shutting down a bank, then it's much easier to get a written voice on that. So that's kind of been my strategy for a while. If anyone has any questions about environmental writing, then I've been through everything, so feel free to throw them at me.
And I remember Chris mentioning this last time we spoke as well, when you first started in the sustainability sector. It was kind of quite similar in that nobody really heard of this before, and what was that like? If you can talk a little bit about.
Yeah, it's funny when you look back on it. So I studied environmental science about 20 years ago now, and that's because sustainability wasn't really a thing, and I did it at Leeds University. It was part of the geography department, and now there's a massive school of environment and sustainability up there. So there's a very little group of us, most of whom unfortunately didn't manage to go into sustainability afterwards. And then you get your first job and you're really chuffed, and after a while you realize, do these companies really want me, or do they have me in this role because they need to have somebody with that job title, and you really fight in your corner. And sometimes I remember you'd go into like a construction site or a project, and people would be saying, "Oh, here comes Swampy, the environmental man, the green man." You'd be like, "No, this is like my job. This is my degree. I care about this. I don't take the mickey out of your job role. So really, don't do that to mine." But that was the attitude that people had. Whereas now, you go in, and I think if somebody at you for caring about the environment and wanting to do it in your job, it would be them that looked silly. So my career almost was like, the first part was like battling and fighting the corner, and now the second part's been feeling like actually maybe we're starting to get somewhere, and it's a bit more enjoyable and a bit more collaborative. I think, going back to Andrea's very first point.
Definitely. Yeah, it's definitely looking so much better right now. And
yeah, it really is.
And
sorry, a long way to go, but we're getting there in a more collaborative way than used to, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. But sort of to contest that, there's sort of like a worry that a lot of the times the climate believers and the people that are wanting to have an impact are sort of only perhaps preaching to the converted, because if you sort of look at it, there's such a large population of people, like the majority of Republicans don't believe that climate change is a human impact, and it's sort of crazy to think about. How do you sort of navigate this? How do you successfully convince the non-believers in sort of addressing this issue?
Well, for me on that one, I mean, I think there is a danger, actually. I do question myself this, and sometimes I'm so surrounded by people who do care that you forget that there's lots of people who unfortunately don't. But I think, the momentum's happening in life, and yeah, you've got to make your mark out there, you've got to make your point, you've got to fight for it, as many people on this panel do. But I think also just the more you bring it into everyday life, and the more you make it normal and practical and reasonable to be sustainable, then the easier that battle is, isn't it? Because it's got to be integrated fully in. And again, lots of people have said it on the panel, it's got to be part of everybody's day job, part of their routine, part of their system. And the way we talk about it at work is going on this journey from being consciously unsustainable, whereas you've got these issues, you've got these problems, but you don't really know what to do about it, and you're having a negative impact, all the way through to trying to make yourself consciously sustainable, where you're taking the right steps in the right direction. And the more you do that, the more it just becomes unconsciously sustainable, and people are doing it without even thinking about it. That's the journey we're on, probably near the beginning and the end. I think that's the approach you have to take, just try and get it into people's unconscious behaviour.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of like small behaviors that add up to a big impact. So I think it's really important that little behavior, like little changes and little actions are not given credit, but are not discouraged, that people are empowered to make like the smallest change. What's even like educating themselves or explaining to someone else, a climate issue, because that's something better than we were yesterday. I'm very passionate about the fact that we shouldn't go super political. So where it's very pro-Biden and climate is associated in the US, you're alienating half of the US population. But newsflash, you need the whole of the US population to come along this journey too. So I think the softer approach is better in trying to incorporate everyone, because we do need everyone. Sorry, Charlie, I think you were jumping in.
I was going to say, actually, I wouldn't be too down about the Republican point, because consistently polling shows that people are more concerned now about the environment than ever. And those level of concern has remained high even during the pandemic. This is really promising. If you've been in the space for decades, which I have, Chris has, I don't know about the others, I've never seen this before. I've never seen this before. People care for a little while, there might be a drought, and suddenly they care about, oh, there's a heat wave, I'm going to talk about global warming, and the next week they don't care anymore. That's been my experience for many, many years. It's extremely promising now we're talking about it, and I think it's really worth remembering that actually I learned about global warming in school. Yes, before we were calling it climate change. We've known about this for a long time, and what happened was billions of pounds were pumped into climate denial by fossil fuel companies. I know it sounds like a wacky conspiracy, and it's really weird that people don't talk about it, but if you Google it, you'll find really good research on it, not just great wacky videos, like actual data. This actually really happened. You'll find Guardian articles on it and Telegraph articles on it. They pumped lots of money into funding climate denial through convincing people that actually, it's not a problem. Actually, it's not happening because of their products. Actually, it's not happening because of people. And that's where we lost the action point. That's where, I noticed it all around me. Suddenly people would have all these theories about, no, it's actually the sun causing it, or it's something else causing it. And that's why when Fridays for the Future and Extinction Rebellion burst onto the streets and just said, no, we're not standing for that anymore, we kind of took the narrative back. And it's gone back, and now it's in a really good place. And I think we need to hold on to this place, because I don't think fossil fuel companies are going to go easily. I think they're just going to give up their products and the amount of money that they make easily. And again, no one wants to hear it. Everyone wants to talk about all the small little changes that we can all make. And that's great. I wrote an entire book on that. I fully support that. I have a very low carbon footprint. Let's be honest about what we're talking about in terms of changes. When you look at the data, it's 73% of emissions that come from energy. Most of that is about burning fossil fuels, and we need to get off them, right? So that's one really huge thing. It's about 19%, which is agriculture. That's good. We're looking at the way we use land and we're changing that. Energy is a massive issue, and all of us can use a bit less, but it's not going to be enough to wean off of these products that we've been sold for a long time, companies that have undermined climate action for a long time. So, I think there's a lot of kind of finger pointing that people do to each other, saying, what are you doing? Are you doing enough? And actually, we can all do a lot. It's not that significant compared to what investors need to do. And we're talking about banks. I just saw a thing today about banks that are recommitting to investing in fossil fuel companies, and there's a big push, can't remember the organization behind it, but there's a big push calling on them to divest. Absolutely needs to happen. Universities need to divest, banks need to divest. Why are we subsidizing something that we know is killing millions of people a year through air pollution and destroying our planet? It's just mind-boggling that it doesn't even get raised. So anyway, I've raised it now. I realize it makes people uncomfortable, but I think it's really important.
To counteract your points, I also think that people in the climate space have also an issue when it comes to personal branding. And for example, oat milks were very unsexy until Oatly came. And I think there's a problem with climate branding, which is it's problem focused. It focuses on those who have money. Sustainability is a premium. And as well as, there's, misinformation out there. And I completely agree that, fossil fuel companies have been fueling misinformation. But at the same point, groups and organizations are coming to us with things like movies like The Inconvenient Truth, which leaves us just completely panicked. It's not solution focused. and super negative. And so I think just like kind of Oatly have done in their very small space of like plant-based things, there's a need to make climate sexy. There's a need to make climate, not with a premium, and also accessible to those with a family of 4 or a student that doesn't have much of a budget or people paying back loans. And likewise, I think our side also needs to change to get out of our bubble and really, 1, 2, 3 major solutions, focus on that and be positive and solution focused.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think with the extreme asks and the extreme campaigning, that a lot of people get put off. I know loads of people who associate climate activism to, they're just put off. They don't even want to have anything to do with it. And I think we need to go for appreciate people's small changes, and at least they're doing something rather than nothing. That's my opinion anyway, and that's kind of the approach we're taking with the PR campaign we're about to launch. Is everyone can do little things, and that's better than doing nothing or putting them off from doing anything.
Absolutely love where this conversation is going, hands we clapping hands and being super excited, because talking about how we deal with that, talking to people who are still fighting it, right? I mean, literally, Zion, you mentioned, for instance, large banks deciding, of course, where does the large bag of money goes, and indeed, very often it goes to where the return on investment is the highest, right? And that's the problem as well, because we're looking at return on investment, which is done on a yearly basis, so very, very short term, and we're talking sustainability, which is long term. It's investment beyond just 1 year. And that's exactly where we have kind of a backlash of different functions, even within one organization. So I feel incredibly lucky to be able to talk to different banks that want to change, but indeed there are still those old structures, those old models, how to reward the people, for instance, portfolio managers who are the ones deciding where the investments go. And I got a chance to talk actually head of a segment at one large bank in regards to agriculture. They're really super keen to change it. However, they're also questioning how to do that so they can really nicely phase out all those large farms that are literally all around the whole world. That's why I'm a huge fan of transition. We have to realize and recognize it's not going to happen over the night. We have to be very clear on what's the business case, what are the alternatives, very clear on what are the data, again, from the business point of view. On the consumer point of view, huge fan of Oatly, a huge, fan of all those brands trying to do something well. And actually, I'm getting a little bit tired of people who are always picking those brands doing quite a lot of things right. And of course, not perfect, but getting to the right direction. But sometimes people tend to pick up those things that are not perfect and really give them some bad, hard time because of that. Just the other day, literally last week, I got asked during an interview for the upcoming project whether I'm an activist. And I got a feeling these days it starts to be almost something you don't want to associate yourself with, because it's almost too radical, and again, not for everyone. Because sometimes even within activism, it's just you're not a good activist if you like Oatly, because Oatly took money from VC that was also investing part of their money to products that are responsible for deforestation. So I really do believe it's transition also on the company side, also on the consumer side. So exactly, we have to be clear on what doesn't work. I do believe we need to point fingers and make it very clear that there are certain people who are responsible for that. At the same time, I really believe it's the positive stories showing that it can be done right, because in the end, it's large companies even changing something, having such a global, massive scale and impact globally, that this is where the larger impact comes, rather than us having 5-minute shower or recycling one packaging from yogurt. So transition all the way, individually, but definitely also on a corporate level.
And then there's the regenerative versus sustainability debate. Where should we focus our time?
Yeah.
All of that sounds so interesting, and it's definitely, I think, definitely something that we need to be thinking about now. So I think a question that I had is I've noticed that a lot of the reason why people don't go sustainable is because people don't necessarily, sustainability takes time and learning and getting resources and things like that, just in like general life, people living more sustainably. And also I think a lot of companies, they don't go sustainable because it doesn't make as much money in some sense, so a lot of it's focused money based. So I guess the question is like, how do you change people's minds or shift the focus so that everyone can be more sustainable and do their bit? Don't know.
Don't mind me asking that, the answering that. I think just one thing for like people starting their careers and getting into sustainability is you can really influence your own company a lot. And so we do lots of workplace design. Actually, what's going on, partly because of this situation we're all in, partly just because there is such a dynamic change to the way people are working, is companies are realizing actually they're not necessarily top of the food chain anymore, and the employees are. And we know that companies that are unsustainable find it harder to attract employees. Look, people just don't want to work for a company that's bad so much anymore. And I think there is a bit of collectivism in that approach. There is, if you're an employee of a company and you start putting forward sustainability initiatives, you form a sustainability society, your bosses aren't going to be annoyed at that. They're going to be pleased that that's taking place, and I don't think they're going to see you as a threat. And I think what you'll be doing is then putting yourself out there as the employee that's doing that, the people in a company that can make a difference. And I think a bit of just employee power on that issue, which you can do without being too strong about it, if that's the right phrase, is a way forwards. So get in there and influence the companies, and on your job applications, put it down. Even if you're not applying for a sustainability job, put it as something you're passionate about. And I think you'll find, influence from the inside is quite a powerful process.
There's also the responsibility of the government to start bringing some of the costs down, or at least, ensuring that sustainable options are not the most expensive option. So I think there's a role to be played by everyone. So businesses, individuals, and the government.
Actually,
change all the way.
One terrible example of that. So I didn't mean to. You got me excited. Yeah. One example of that is actually you pay more VAT in the built environment. You get charged 20% VAT on the refurbishment job that you don't on a new build, which is ridiculous. If you keep the building you're in and just do it up, it's obviously much more sustainable. So excuse me for talking over you there. I didn't mean to, but you just got me on a hobby horse or a high horse about exactly that topic that infuriates me.
This is such a relevant point, Chris, and indeed, that's why we need systemic change, right? It's not just individuals, it's not just one company, it's not just one industry. It's really like the overall system, like what we consider economy that actually works, and not only for 1% or selected group of people, but that really works for everyone. And talking about what you just mentioned, that it's very often way more difficult and more expensive to repair something rather than just toss something away and buy a new thing. It has a lot to do also how the taxation works, but not to go into too many details because that would be a whole completely different conversation. Indeed, like right now, you're actually having resources that are not priced right. So it's not really the true price, so to say. Virgin resources can be quite cheap. And also the waste creation is not really priced well. It's relatively cheap, hence many companies don't really care. And the penalties that they get if they don't follow those rules are just ridiculously small compared to the profit they're making of them. So we also need to consider like changes in completely taxation, rewarding system. Again, talking about those portfolio managers that are large financial services that are deciding, like, where does the money go? Where do we invest? I mean, well, if you're being rewarded for getting the highest return on investment, of course, you don't care about long term. You don't care that you're going to invest all those buckets of money. And we're talking obviously trillions here. So unimaginable, huge amounts into something that's not sustainable, but hey, people still use it, and I'm going to get a really large return on that. We have to change everything.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. That's a really exciting way that this segue, if you like, is a really exciting topic and good discussion to be having. I'm just a little bit conscious of the time, so we have until past, and I'd just like to bring in some of the questions as well. And somebody's asked about master's courses, and Charlotte's already answered in the chat. If you want to expand on those right now.
Yeah, London Business School have some great management schemes, and as an Imperial student, you get 10% off, which is always great because less loans. And LSE have, again, LSE is a business school, so they have some management and sustainability ones too. It's harder to get in as an Imperial student to LSE, so that's a little bit more difficult. And then Oxford have some good masters as well. And then UCL have, I don't think they have specifically management, but they have climate related masters as well that you can look into. And all of them come to around the same price, I think. Yeah, that's why. Yeah.
And just to bring insight from the Netherlands, there are actually some amazing universities for those people who would be also interested to explore what's across the border, so to say, even though it might be a tiny bit more difficult now once UK is not a part of European Union anymore. I highly recommend checking out Wageningen University, University of Amsterdam, and TU Delft. I will make sure that I will jot down all those complicated names also in the chat. There's some really wonderful master courses where you can learn a lot. And as you probably know, Netherlands is really a country that is doing quite well in terms of sustainability, especially when we're looking in terms of water, circular economy. So definitely worth giving it a shot.
Thank you very much. Yeah. If anybody has any more questions, feel free to unmute and ask them, or if you want, pop them in the chat box and I can read them out, or Zena can read them out.
I mean, whilst we're waiting, if people are typing or anything, I actually had a question for Andrea and about, because I know Netherlands is quite advanced in terms of like making their city more sustainable and things like that. And I was wondering if you could maybe give some pointers or any advice on maybe how other parts of the world could also, what initiatives and things like that could be done, maybe even in the UK, to try and make it a bit more sustainable.
Yeah, that's a really great question, Zena, and of course, happy to share. As for good news, there are some real targets. So the Netherlands as a country has a goal to become completely climate neutral by 2050, and they want to be 50% carbon neutral and circular by year 2030. So you got 9 years to get there. And quite exciting news is that as of last year, City of Amsterdam, my beautiful city, has also a strategy to become 50% circular by 2030 and 100% circular by 2050. And I do believe having those targets is incredibly important because it's a sort of commitment, also public commitment, and it really helps you to put things into motion. Strategy is already in place. It includes 4 main sectors what the city will be focusing on. And yeah, very, very curious to see how this will be progressing. For people who are interested to learn more, just let me know on the site. Very happy to share with you some reports and insights.
Amazing, thank you. I think there's a question now in the chat for Zion, and it says, I think I read an article that you didn't like the whole doomsday attitude when talking about climate change, especially now that you say ideas have changed. Do you think it's important to stay optimistic And if so, how could people do this or communicate or to slash activists help?
It's a great question. So if anybody has read the media around this, there were criticisms earlier about activists putting people off, and that was actually my reason for leaving Extinction Rebellion, and it was well covered in the news worldwide, because apparently it's just not something that you don't leave groups like that. I do think that, so I think it's complicated, because in my work I speak to a lot of climate scientists. For example, James Hansen, anyone knows him, father of climate change, he's known as. He's one of the first climate scientists to draw attention to climate change, written lots of books on it. And when you talk to people like that, and you ask them about the modeling, and you ask them about how serious it is, it's hard not to feel the whole doomsday thing, because honestly, it's not exaggerating. I went on the Andrew Neil show, he said, you're just scaring people with these apocalyptic visions. And I said, actually, if you speak to climate scientists, that's what they're saying is going to happen. It's really bad, it's really scary. And at the same time, you're right, that isn't a good way to communicate, right? It just puts people off. It makes them feel like, what's the point in trying? It makes them feel overwhelmed. I've met so many young people with eco-anxiety. It's terrible, the rise of eco-anxiety, and I don't want kids to have that. But I do try to lead people towards, and this is where my split came from Extinction Rebellion, because I was in that group saying, we need to help lead with solutions. And they were saying, no, we just need to raise awareness about how bad it is. And it didn't really sit with me, but I do think they did a really good job in helping to get it, just make it a popular thing that everybody now talks about. And I really think, massive credit to these groups, because before that, there was no concept of net zero. Now everybody uses net zero. The government made a net zero target. That came from us doing that horrible work where everybody hated us as activists, but we did get it on the agenda. And that's me saying that after trying for 20 years and getting nowhere, and then suddenly it got somewhere. So it has had an impact, and that's really good. But now we need to move on from that and go, well, okay, lots of people are concerned, but now we need to communicate really effectively about solutions. And a lot of those solutions you're already talking about, right? You're saying in this panel, support good businesses, look at what their sustainability criteria are. Look at the choices you're making, and be proud of yourself. Also, just don't get too overwhelmed, because you can't do everything. You just can't. I never learned to drive. I have a very low carbon footprint. I gave up flying years and years ago. 2008, I gave up flying. I recognize that actually most people can't live this way, and it's quite hard, especially with children. It's quite hard. So I don't think it's even about one size fits all solutions. All you can really do is find what works for you, preach at other people, and try not to get bogged down about it, because it is overwhelming and it is scary. And if you go and read any book by any climate scientist, something by James Hansen, or you follow Richard Betts, he's quite good on Twitter. He works at the Met Office. He's the climate lead. Some of the data is quite scary, and it does make you think, wow, I'm really overwhelmed, and how can I possibly make a difference? But at the same time, it's that thinking that's kind of got us to this point. So as a communicator, I kind of try to take people on that journey when I do talks, and I do a lot of media and television and stuff, and I try to say, look, yeah, it is that bad, but hope isn't lost. And actually, there is a problem with the doomsday narrative, which is that activists can get carried away, and they can say, we're just going to fall off a cliff and there's no point, it's too late. I've heard this a lot. Actually, scientists aren't saying that. Actually, what they're saying is it's more like a slope. We're going down the slope, right? And we're trying to keep away from that 1.5 warming, and maybe we won't. Maybe we'll get worse, and we'll get towards 2 or 3 degree warming. Any degree that we don't get to is good. That's the reality. So long as we pull back at some point, and I think that is already starting to happen, because there are some serious conversations happening now, and COP is happening as well this year, end of the year, COP26. I'm going as a speaker, and I think that, these are the things that are really going to make a difference. So try to stay optimistic, and try to communicate the good things as well as the bad.
Amazing, thank you. I think I'm just going to go down the list, because I think we've got quite a few questions popped up just now. So the next question is, what are your thoughts on sustainable investing? If anyone has any thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a big part of what we're focusing on as well. Indeed, to really see how financial institutions can become more sustainable, more circular. And many people don't realize that. I mean, we are obviously a part of our beautiful sustainable bubble, right? And it's very important because it just feels great to have people who understand you when you talk about those topics. But financial services are actually the ones deciding where money flows and what gets supported, and in a bigger picture, what becomes strength, right? Because if it has money, it can scale, and so on. So I would say sustainable investments are absolutely crucial. The fact is, it's still not very clearly defined, as Zion, you pointed this very, very well. Like it can be still a blurry line what's considered sustainable, what's not. There's this like basic framework, ESG, environmental, societal, and governmental framework. However, many front runners go really beyond that as well. And also what many people don't realize, even when company has ESG reporting, meaning they're really marking their portfolios, whether they comply with the ESG framework, it doesn't mean that the whole portfolio is benchmarked against this framework. So it's, yeah, quite important to really have a look at what are the companies investing in. And in terms of sustainability and sustainable investments, I do believe this is going to grow, because even the large investors, as for good news, are realizing that investing in oil and gas from the long term means you're going to have quite a lot of assets that are going to be just obsolete, stranded assets, so to say. And the same goes for agriculture and large farmings that are based on animal productions. And again, we're not talking about small, cute ecological farms with 100 pieces of cattle, but really like thousands and thousands. So I would say there's also a trend that investors are very carefully looking into that. That's actually the whole point why they're also following and part of the CDP Carbon Disclosure Project reporting, because they're providing those reports, giving them at least some sort of insight into that.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think the next question has already been answered. In terms of communication, English-speaking jobs in the Netherlands, I think that's already been answered. Correct me if I'm wrong. There's questions. Hold up. Sorry. So there's another question for Zion about the simple way to improve our science communication skills.
Sure. I was offered a book deal years ago and accepted it, and it was on green parenting, evidence-based green parenting. So I read hundreds of studies, all referenced in the back. It's cross-checked, and you know, front page of Telegraph magazine, all really good. It had a chapter in there on vaccines. Now, vaccines to me are a social justice issue, and I put that in with environmental concerns. And actually, if you don't know, there's quite a lot of anti-vaccination sentiment among green-minded parents. I don't know why this happens. I don't know why they get lumped together, but I've always been a little bit unusual in that I'm pro-vaccine, in that I just believe that, you know, shouldn't be exposed to things and contract things that can be eradicated. Anyway, after I wrote this book, one thing I didn't expect was the absolute hate mail I got based on that chapter. And I even had people emailing me saying, love your book, except for that chapter on vaccines. Like, are you paid by Big Pharma? Which of course I'm not. And I actually had hate mail, and I was like, right, I've done something wrong here. I haven't communicated this right. Because all I did was I put the data in there, and I said, it doesn't say you should do this or should do that. It just said, here's what the research says, go and make up your own mind, sort of thing. It really triggered a lot of people. So I went back to university to do a master's in science communication because I wanted to understand what I'd done wrong. I did the master's at University of West of England, which is one of the main departments for it in the world. So most of the texts we study are from that department, and I highly recommend it, even if you can just dip in and do some of their sessions. I know they're all remote learning now as well. And the first thing they said when we went to the class was, look, facts don't change people's minds. So I'd written a whole book on facts, thinking it would appeal to lots of people. And actually, there's just quite a niche of people like me who respond to that, who respond to data, who have science backgrounds. And so, yeah, the main thing that you can do is learn good communication of facts without actually talking a lot about the facts. So it's storytelling essentially. I wouldn't be able to distill the whole masters into one paragraph even, but what I would say is that any course that you can do, any reading that you can do on the topic of communication will help. I'd recommend it.
That sounds brilliant. The next question I think we have is, someone says they're very keen on going to consultancy for sustainable development, but they're from a science background and is competing with material sciences and people who hold engineering degrees. And what are some recommendations in pursuing career in this? So maybe if we go to Chris.
Yeah, so well, I've got a science background, and I think don't be too bogged down by what your background is. Really, it's where you want to go that's the issue, isn't it? And it's how you sell yourself. So I think you know, find the sort of company you want to work for, and then make your CV match it. Would be my point. I mean, if you're early in your career, the world's your oyster in many ways. I think you don't need to necessarily worry too much. I think if you can get across that potential employers that, you know, this is who you are and this is what you're passionate about and this is what you believe in, then actually probably that's the best thing you can do at this point in your career. And I think, I mean, Lucy and I had quite a nice chat about it a while ago. The way you present yourself on a CV is unfortunately the way you make your mark on the employer, and that probably counts for as much as what your degree is. And I think your CV needs to reflect your passion for the role, and that's probably the best way to get a job.
I would just add to that, for people who have a feeling that there are not enough opportunities for them, at least like in terms of paid positions, it's always a great idea to check out what are the available internships or even volunteering. Now, the question is why? It actually gets you into a network of like-minded people, many of who probably will more or less already work within the field. And this is their way to give back or learn more or meet more like-minded people. So I would say science is a perfect background for consulting. There are so many skills within consulting you can just learn, but indeed the facts, the way of thinking, the critical way of thinking, being able to analyze, do a proper research, this is something you can train for, and this is real added value to any consulting company you would like to join.
That is brilliant. Thank you so much. And I think we have another question about, so they are a plant biology student looking at a career in sustainable agriculture and developing GM crops. They've realized that the public attitude to GM is still very unfavorable. And hold on, I've just lost it. Sorry about that. And
don't understand the technology behind it. So does anybody have any advice on how to get work experience in the sustainable policy making and how to get into this from a scientific background?
Oh, so I did my GCSE. I did my dissertation on the benefits of GM crops in different locations around the world. And this is a slightly off piece, but it was quite interesting for me because I was really against it, actually, which I know you're not supposed to go into a dissertation with a closed mind, but I did. And I remember writing off to lots of scientists around the world to get their data. I mean, this was a little bit when the internet was a bit more clunky, so you had to sort of request data back then. And I remember this guy from The Hague, quite a senior soil scientist, writing back to me, and he basically said, "Who do you think you are, like making comments on basically the growth opportunities for agriculture in different countries that are suffering a lot more than you?" And it did change my views completely. I think like getting in and influencing policy, probably the best way you can do that is you're going to have to take an internship, I think, and follow Andrea's route and get yourself involved as much as you can in an organization and then build yourself up from there. It's hard to influence policy, I think, from the get-go, unfortunately. So yeah, I gave you my little anecdote at the beginning, but yeah, go for it. Excuse me.
I would say, so I do work with a lot of policymakers, and I would say that public engagement is just as important as the policy side. It is the communication and trying to shift the public narrative. It's a really hard thing to do, but a lot of policymakers that I speak to, like really top politicians even, will say, well, yeah, I completely agree with you, but I'm not going to sign off on that because no one will vote for me, basically. It sounds stupid, but it's really that basic. So I don't think it's even about getting in there, because once you get on board with the policymakers, they generally feel their hands are tied. So much of it, they don't do a lot of public engagement themselves. So much of it is about public engagement. And actually, if you can find a way to do any kind of public engagement, you're writing a blog about it or making videos or anything to explain how you understand this issue, why it's so important and what the evidence base is for it, that can be a really good way to get attention of policymakers. Then see your video, who you then send your video, who might even make a role for you. I literally know people who have had roles created as science communicators in organizations, scientific organizations that didn't have them before, because they know they have a need for public engagement, but they don't have in my experience, a lot of scientists don't have a clue how to do it. You can kind of a foot in both, in both areas if you're innovative about it, and just going strong. By the way, I've never had a job through a CV. I've always had job offers because I'm a writer, so my work is my CV. It's very visible, and everything's going that way now. Social media and writing and videos content is your online CV nowadays. So I recommend to everybody to do any kind of that work anyway online, because it really helps to build your portfolio.
That's so interesting. Thank you very much. And I think I actually had a quick question just in terms of like startups. So going into a startup is hard enough as it is, but if you want to make a sustainable startup, like what are some of the key things you'd have to consider when going into doing something like that?
I think sustainability has to be embedded in your business from the get-go. And I mean, it really depends what startup you're going in, whether it's tech or your, hardware or etc. But if you're making a particular product, it's really making sure that the suppliers you choose from the beginning, you have great relations with them and they are sustainable or planning to be sustainable. And now if you create a startup that isn't sustainable, you will not last. And I think that's just fact. And to be resilient as a startup, you need to have sustainability embedded in your strategy, and make sure the people that you hire are also passionate about sustainability as well. And just to add a note on, if anyone wants to create a startup at Imperial, the Imperial Enterprise Lab is a great place to start, and you don't even need to have an idea. And they really help students. I think it's probably the best enterprise innovator hub out there in the UK. And they have funds that you can get access to if you simply have an idea and you want to test it out. They have We Innovate, which is women in innovation. And they literally have so many experts that you can speak to, whether you have an idea or a business, etc. And so if you're even considering it, have a chat, and they will quick fire kind of this momentum and this passion, and will really point you in the right direction. I really recommend it.
I think, I don't know if Sarah had something to say, or if she's disappeared.
Still here. I'm just sat on the couch now. I don't have anything to add to that. No, I think it was really good points. I went to Brunel, and I don't think my innovation hub was anywhere near as good as the Imperial one, but that was a few years ago.
And Imperial building the White City campus, and the heart of it is innovation, and so I only think it's going to get bigger. So definitely jump on that bandwagon. Then they have these cool events where it's called a pick and mix night, and you can kind of just do a 2-minute elevation pitch of a supposedly idea, or you can just attend and meet people with ideas if you do want to co-found. And I think being a student is, you are swimming in debt when you come out, but it's also, you have no responsibility, and there are ways to finance yourselves through these hubs or accelerator programs. And so I think coming out of uni is this, you've got all this knowledge in your brain, you've got a great network of people and of friends and of professors, and I think it's just the best way to just come out there. And honestly, with COVID, we don't know how the job market will be. So if you're finding you're twiddling your thumbs whilst doing job applications, then go for it. You've had an idea for chocolate milk or a sustainability hub or, sustainable tampons. Just go for it. It's not wasted time. You're applying for jobs.
I would like to add, from the point of view of talking to quite a lot of startups and being a mentor to quite some, it's also very important that you really have a solution that is solving a problem and making life of people easier. Saying that, it's very important to do your research that this is really unique, or really think about how your solution is better what is already available. And last but not least, make it about the end user, so super custom centric. That should be really a cornerstone of your startup, why you're doing that. And then indeed, like what Charlie has been mentioning, put a team together that is passionate, has the right skills. Really think about what's your financial model, how you're going to be sustainable also as you start growing, how you can scale this up and really create larger impact. And also think about whether you guys are adaptable. So as the market develops, as you realize based on the research that something is changing, how can you nicely pivot and deliver the value?
Also, if anyone's looking for some side work, social media stuff, I need help. It's unpaid at the moment, but we're working with some pretty interesting and fun brands. So if anyone wants to do I don't know, it's probably an hour a day, if that, give me a shout.
Yeah, that's brilliant. It's something I'm not quite sure if EcoSoc are doing this, but EduVenture, we are starting to put together a page full of possible opportunities that we do open up to other unis as well. So we could definitely just gather if anyone has any opportunities that they could offer. We would definitely love to put all that and offer it to the students, 100%. I think we've hit past, and I don't think we have any more questions either. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of our speakers today for coming and taking the time to come and chat to us and answer the questions, and say thank you to everyone who's attended today. And we hope that you had got a lot of information and got all of your questions answered. If you haven't had enough of sustainability for today, there is another talk tonight from 6 till 7 with EduVenture Bristol. So if you go on the EduVenture page, you can get tickets for that there. And also this talk has been recorded. So for EduVenture people, we will be sending that out on Monday. And I'll also make sure to get the link to Lucy, who will, I'm sure, send it out to the EcoSoc people as well. So yeah, so thank you everyone. And I hope you all have a great Tuesday and a great rest of the week.
Thank you everybody for
very
coming.
much.
Bye everyone. Thank you. Enjoy your evening.
Yes. Thank you all.
Thank you.